sustainable human development as part of the picture, whereas previously it was probably just biodiversity conservation, protected area, financing, much more of a focus on finance rather than sustainable human development, which makes our job probably a little bit more difficult. But if any of you were at the presentation yesterday at the Jeff workshop, the main threat to Madagascar's biodiversity is actually its people. So they have to be a part of the solution. Very briefly on the foundation itself, as Ray was saying, this is an independent foundation. There's a board of 9 professionals. There are no government representatives. That's actually prohibited by law on the board. And all of them very different backgrounds. There are some environmentalists and scientists, biologists, but for the most part, they're from the private sector. I'm for myself, I'm a corporate attorney and not an environmentalist or anything like that. And starting off, we have a really small staff. There's actually probably more board members than there are staff members, official staff members. And this is something that needs to evolve. And as Ray was saying, for some conservation trust funds, there is help in the beginning to cover operational costs. I think this is crucial because it took us 3 or 4 years to satisfy all the conditions to disperse funds from our donors. And during that time, we had to put in place the whole framework that would govern our work, including our own bylaws, our policies, all these things that had to be pre-approved by the donors before they would give us their money. But once they do give us the money, there are only ex post facto verifications, audits, occasional operational audits at their cost in their meetings with donors. And this is the debate about CTFs and projects. I have to say that we do spend quite a bit of our time trying not to become a project because donors want to treat us like a project. And this is something that they are not really very comfortable with, as you will see later on. Just our contributors to our capital are mostly, and I'll have a graph later that shows with more detail, bilateral and multilateral organizations for about 98% of our funding. And it's invested at JP Morgan Chase in Geneva. And the income that is generated then goes to, they must be protected areas, whether they're the new ones or long established in Madagascar. And this is just to show you, on the left is, as I said, our ramp-up period took a very long time. We got a sinking fund from KfW for 425,000 euros per year for 5 specific protected areas. And that was all we were dispersing from our creation in 2005 until 2010. Because it took a long time, as I said, to satisfy all the conditions to disbursement of the different donations to our fund. And unfortunately also, as some of you may have heard, we had a political crisis in Madagascar in 2009. But luckily we were able to get the last few tranches from KfW and the GEF, and also from the French in the last few years. That brings us now to this level of grant making. So again, it takes a few years to build up this institution before it can grant any money. On the right, in green, is the need, and in blue is what we can provide. And this is one of the big problems in Madagascar. As I said, there was a decision to triple the protected area surface, so that made the cost much higher. It's going to be around $40 million a year are the estimates for funding the whole protected area system in Madagascar. And we now have to go out and increase our own capital levels if we are going to be a player in helping finance those protected areas. And this is just for your information where our funds come from. On the right, you see there's the World Bank and Global Environment Facility for about 37%. They and KfW, who's at 12%. That portion, about 49% of our donors, have actually decided in granting us the capital. They have specified exactly how the revenues from that capital must be used, exactly where, actually, which protected areas. So this has also been an evolution, in part because of the change in law, where these donors are particularly concerned about the funding of Madagascar National Parks, as you saw earlier, the entity that has been managing national parks up until this change in law. And for the other half, for about 41% of our capital comes from the French government and the FFEM, and it's a donation without any strings attached. But we still have a prioritization manual. There are ways in which we determine which protected areas will be given financing, since obviously we can't finance them all. Just a couple of examples of what we do finance. So Makira Natural Park is a park that's managed by WCS. And in that case, what we are funding are specific projects that are designed to reduce pressures on the protected area and give people alternative sources of revenue. Whereas another national park that we finance that is managed by the Madagascar National Parks, in that case what we fund are the recurrent costs of managing that park, the cost of salaries and gasoline and electricity and things like that. So just to summarize quickly, I have a couple of slides here. We thought at the time that we had set very ambitious goals of having $50 million in capital. It took a long time to do it, so this is a process that takes time. Sometimes you have to have the legal framework. Sometimes it takes a while, a lot of technical assistance, a lot of help we got from our various donors to put in place our manuals. We're very grateful to CFA for the training that they have given us over the last few years in different areas in order to build up our own capacity. Institution building is something that takes a lot of time and a lot of money. And this sometimes is overlooked because people are more interested in what is going to be the revenue from your capital and how much can you give the protected areas. And yet our own costs also are something that need to be looked at in our own capacity as well. As I said, we were able to get the $50 million, but it's not nearly enough, and so now the challenges are to go out and compete. Can you imagine competing with the WWFs and the CIs of the world from our foundation in Madagascar? This is a big challenge, huge, and especially since we are also a Francophone country, it's unusual for people to speak English there. And then one of the things that I have to say also, though, one of the good things about the fund, especially if you put it in the context of the comparison CTFs and projects, is that with the political crisis, the military coup of 2009, all the donors stepped back and there is no more funding. It was an exceptional vote at the World Bank to get an extension on a credit agreement for environmental protection. And, but we have been able to continue our operations. So in a way, it's not just sustainability over the long term, but also some stability when you're so dependent in a country as poor as Madagascar on foreign assistance. And then there are areas that might be concerns or maybe where we are weaker than projects, as was stated a few minutes ago. The fluctuation is a little bit of an issue. There is market volatility. There is the economic crisis that we just went through. So these are things that we are tackled with. We have been extremely conservative in our investments. There have been past experiences in Madagascar where a sudden huge devaluation just gutted another fund. So this is fresh memory in the minds of many people on our board. And so our returns are weak, and yet the demands are very high. So we are under a lot of pressure to diversify more into the stock market in order to have higher revenues. And then for a fund in a country like Madagascar, you really do need this wide spectrum of very specific skills, sophisticated skills, such as monitoring the capital markets, to, as I said, to fundraising, to selecting projects and review and evaluation and making sure that we comply with some of the standards of our donors. And so this is a challenge. Our friends in Latin America, I think, are a little bit ahead of us on that. We were copied on their model, but we don't necessarily have the human capacity that they have. And then one of the big issues is, as you saw in one of the charts, is that relative to the cost of the average protected area, we can't cover 100%. So we have to pick and choose what we're going to cover, and when we do that, afterwards it's difficult to say what was our impact, in what way did we really contribute to the protection of this protected area. Or if we're doing human development projects such as rice irrigation or something like that, it's difficult to show how that kept people from cutting down the rosewood or killing the lemurs. So this is one of the big challenges that we face. And then on the issue of advocacy, actually, I have to say that in our context, we're not really completely understood as being just one tool among many for providing financing to the protected areas. Instead, we are exactly what Julien was saying at the beginning. We are taking precious resources that the government would rather spend on something else. And so there is resentment and misunderstanding about what our role is, and especially since, as I said, there's no government representative on the board, and there's no reporting necessarily to the government. And yet, when we got the GEF financing, or World Bank, or AFD, the government Ministry of Finance had to sign off on that. And then, as I said, we have to try to diversify our sources of funding because, again, it's not certain that we will be able to renew all that, so we are turning to the private sector. And in a country that's quickly becoming a mining country, and a lot of also offshore petroleum interests, there's a risk that people will say that it's just greenwashing. And so it's complicated. And again, we're competing with other areas, such as education, health, and many other needs that Madagascar has. It's a harder sell. So in the end, there are a lot of opportunities that the CTFs present, and clearly, obviously, I think that it's a very important tool, especially for the long term in a country such as Madagascar. We've had 20 years of project financing of the environment with some success, but the donors themselves are beginning to worry that they wouldn't be able to renew such funding levels year after year for the environment in Madagascar, and that contributed to the creation of our fund. But at the same time, we can't do it all. There's pressure to do it all. I think that for many years to come, combination of trust funds and projects is inevitable. The question is what proportions, and also I think that we do need the economic development of Madagascar as a whole, so that institutions like ours can be more effective and bring more of a contribution. And just before I say thank you and goodbye, we did bring some documents, our annual report at the back of the room if any of you are interested in more information about the trust fund. Thank you very much for your attention.
next presentation. Hi everyone, I'm Fernanda. I work for Fumbio's Communication and Networks team. Well, Fumbio is also a private environmental fund. We are based in Rio, and we offer services towards biodiversity conservation. We do the design and management of financial mechanism, the selection and management of projects, territorial analysis, coordination of international network projects. Our mission is to provide strategic resources for biodiversity conservation, and we have a set of good practices that have led to very good results, such as over $250 million executed since our creation in '96. We have a multi-sectorial board of directors. There is academia, private sector, government, and environmentalists, and other good practices such as a very diverse portfolio of projects. One of these projects that actually is another fund within Fumbio that I want to present to you today is the Atlantic Forest Fund. Fumbio was invited by the State Secretariat of Environmental from Rio to design a financial mechanism that would allocate compensation resources from private companies to the state protected areas. So companies are required to identify and mitigate all their impacts when that's not possible, which is in many cases. The compensation resources had to be executed by companies themselves to benefit protected areas. Well, now Fumbio has designed this model that allows companies to choose whether they want to do direct execution or if they want to work through the fund. The mechanism today executes resources that come from donations and compensation. We do have a flexible structure that allows other types of resources to come, such as PES and carbon that Ray mentioned in his presentation. And so far we have benefited protected areas, but we also do have some flexibility to support other types of conservation projects. In 2008, Fumbio did a pilot phase, and it was very successful. So in 2009, SEA decided to sign an agreement with us. SEA is in charge of the coordination of the fund as a whole, and within that institution you have the Chamber for Environmental Compensation. They are a technical team that selects the projects and the protected areas that will receive the resources from the compensation. We have an independent auditor that does an annual assessment of the whole mechanism, and Fumbio acts as manager. We do the technical and financial monitoring and reporting. We do procurement for goods and services, contractings, and all types of management activities. The beneficiaries of the Atlantic Forest Fund are the protected areas managing organs. Most of the resources have benefited the protected areas of the state, but when there was direct impact caused to municipal and federal areas, they also received resources from the fund. Priority is given by law to protected areas of strict protection, but in the same case as before, when you have a direct impact, we can be flexible about that. So what are the results of the Atlantic Forest Fund? Up to today, we have a portfolio of $108 million, out of which 29 have already been executed. We have from Fumbio an average rate of executing these resources of $1 million per month. That was the average for 2012. And 50 enterprises have chosen to work through the Atlantic Forest Fund instead of doing direct execution of the resources. This has benefited 39 projects in 29 protected areas in the state. Like I told you, the Chamber of Compensation does the selection of the projects, and they include elaborating and implementing management plans, infrastructure, and strengthening and supporting of PA management. We have also created an endowment of over $10 million. This endowment will be invested for 1 year, and then it will be directed to cover recurring costs of protected areas. The idea is that we will benefit from this very fruitful moment that the state of Rio is going through to capitalize for the long term. We have the World Cup coming up, the Olympics. We have a government that is very focused on renovation of run-down urban areas, and we have urban growth like most cities in the world today. So we are taking advantage of this moment for the long term. What are the overall advantages of using the compensation resources through the Atlantic Forest Fund? Well, it's an easy solution for private companies. They don't have to allocate staff and time and change the focus from their core businesses to fulfill this legal obligation. They can just use our mechanism. And so far, Fombia's operating costs have been very low. Actually, they are lower than the interest rates from the compensation, so we call ourselves a zero-cost mechanism. The public governance and private execution allows for a very low-risk execution of these resources, and the mechanism is to allow for a short, medium, and long-term planning. Like Ray and Julian presented, the idea is that the managing organs for protected areas of the state, federal, and municipal, they can plan ahead and think what they want to do to strengthen the protected areas. Also, Fombia gains a lot in economies of scale. Since we are procuring for all these protected areas at once, we have some market power. Like I told you, it's a flexible mechanism, and it has allowed the improvement of the quantity and quality of protected areas in the state, which generates a lot of natural and cultural value to the city and economic development also. And we have noticed that this mechanism can be reproduced in any case when companies have to fulfill some kind of mandatory legal obligation